live? Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. So Jérôme, Orchid, thank you so much for joining us today. I really am excited about what the next team has put together for us. And I just want to introduce myself. My name is Helen Kontozopoulos. I'm the co-founder of ODAIA. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto at the Department of Computer Science. And I wanted to welcome to this talk, Jérôme and Orchid. And I wanted, Jérôme, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Helen, and hi, everyone. So my name is Jérôme de Larosière. I'm French. I'm based in Boston. And in my current role, I'm heading up the marketing for rare disease at Ipsen US. So I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk about this important topic, especially important in rare disease.
Hi, everyone. My name is Orchid. I'm thrilled to be on this stage and be able to talk a little bit about something that's close to my heart, how to help pharma get closer to its customers. I have been in pharma for most of my life and very recently, as of a year ago, moved over to a company that is actually a vendor to pharma and provides AI predictive analytics platform to pharma. I'm very happy to be here to discuss the story of how we can get closer to where we need to with the digital transformation and use of AI. Back to you, Helen.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so let's start it off. Let's start with the first question we have. What does digital transformation mean to you as a leader when marketing a rare disease product? I'll start with Jérôme.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Helen. So, I think, rare disease is an area with a very high unmet need. There are more than 7,000 rare diseases, less than 10% have a treatment, and really digital can support at every stages, right, from development to commercialization. But if we focus on commercialization today, I strongly believe that some of the critical challenges in rare disease can be addressed in an effective way through digital innovation. And I think that there are a couple of priority areas that you can think about. One of them is driving earlier diagnosis. Technology can support and should support the better education of physicians on really how to identify patients with rare disease. And I think we talked earlier in the day about the purpose underpinning digital transformation. And this is a good example of that because the potential impact on individual patients and families is so huge. Improving the time to diagnosis, the time to treatment by just 1 year, or a few months can not only improve the outcomes, but it can also prevent the harmful interventions that are so common in rare disease. So driving earlier diagnosis is one area. The second area is post-treatment initiation, right? Because the patient numbers are so small in rare disease, there is an opportunity to leverage technology in combination with human support to be able to provide more personalized support and services to patients. And finally, there's a third area that's worth mentioning, which is the understanding of the patient journey. There's so much we don't know in rare disease, and really traditional research can only partially fill the gaps. So initiatives like applying predictive analytics to claims data, for example, can really inform us on the journeys of the patients and help us better define archetypes of care and referral pathways. The last thing I would say is really one of the critical success factors is how tailored we are to the specific needs of the business. And these needs can differ from one disease state to the other. So I think it's important to remember as leaders in the space, that the digital tools that worked in a disease state are not necessarily good recipes for success in a different disease state. So we need as much as possible to walk away from one size fits all approach and really lead from the two simplest questions. What are we trying to solve is number one, and then what success will look like.
That's very interesting to see what kind of what would success look like for you, Orchid, in this comment. Again, if you want me to repeat the question, but what does digital transformation mean to you as a leader in marketing and just overall in pharma?
Thanks, Helen. It's wonderful to listen to the different aspects of what Jérôme described. It's not just talking about what are our physicians doing, what are our patients doing. It's really the connection of them. And one of the things that I think, for me, digital transformation has become such a ubiquitous term. I guess it means different things to different people. For us at ODAIA, what we're trying to do is really try to bring the pieces together. So when we talk about helping commercial teams work better, within commercial, from my experience being in pharma, the sales team is often in a silo from the marketing team, from the medical team, from the other account-facing teams. And the patient is somewhere out there. And so trying to really do what pharma's always been trying to do, which is put the customer at the center, and the customer often is the patient, should be the patient. And with our tools, I think what we can do now with AI is really trying to link all of that together, to be precise, to be predictive, and to get into that journey, whether it's a rep journey, a sales rep journey, or a patient journey, or a physician journey, and be able to layer all of that so that all the front-facing people in an organization can have that one view. To me, that would be the panacea of what we're trying to create.
I think, yeah, I really like how we think about the digital transformation. One of the largest parts of that digital transformation we hear is, by using artificial intelligence. So that's one of the largest, we're hearing one of the biggest values AI can bring, but how does it bring value to analytics? And then how important is I know how important the quality and quantity of the data is, and the availability it is to the outputs, especially when building products. I'm wondering, Jérôme, like, where are you seeing the biggest value in AI, and where is the quality and quantity issue that comes up, especially when we're trying to create the best outputs?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I would break this down a little bit in two parts, right? I think there are traditional areas of focus to which artificial intelligence, advanced analytics is providing improvements, allowing us to be more efficient, to be more timely, to be more precise. And then second, there are new things, right, that AI allows us to do that were simply not possible before. So on the first category of incremental innovation, one area is real-time data mining, which can really help to generate new insights. And in that sense, interestingly, it complements traditional ways of approaching insights and analytics, and it informs future qualitative research. So that's one area. Another area is segmentation, which can be much more dynamic. So sales and marketing teams can really see the impact of their activities on the behaviors of the HCPs, which allows to adjust the approach accordingly and to build this very useful feedback loop. But then if we move to the second category of those new things that AI capabilities allow us to do, I think making predictions, right, is one of them. Predicting, for example, how HCP behaviors will evolve based on patterns, or predicting where a patient will be found, which is so important in rare disease. And it really allows us to be more forward-looking, right, as opposed to looking backward at historical data and previous assumptions. And then another is it allows us to process and integrate different sources of data, really differentiating the signal from the noise and extracting those actionable insights that will really move the business.
Orchid, what do you think about that when it comes to how much, we're hearing about data dumps and about how much AI needs to be brought into our analytics. What are your comments about the quality and quantity as well?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just wanted to say that the predictive side is, I mean, Jérôme already talked about it, is really the key to all of this. We were asked recently from a customer, what's the difference between what you're bringing and the dashboards we have? And, one of the differences is we've always, exactly what Jérôme said, we've been looking backwards and looking at historical data to sort of project the future with tools that are very manual and static. What I get excited about when you mention data is the fact that you don't need a ton of data to do AI, first of all, but you have enough data to be able to predict. And on the prediction side, I also think there's a human element that needs to be respected here. You know, I spent many years of my life managing sales people, sales managers, sales reps, and from what we hear now, companies are trying to use sales and digital. We are not taking away the role of the sales, and in fact, sales reps through this world that we're in now have more time with physicians. What I'm hearing is, you know, we can do Zoom calls and they'll be actually longer, and some physicians are used to seeing us for 20 minutes instead of 5 minutes. So that role of the rep needs to be augmented in all of this data dump that we talk about. So using AI to really make predictions is the key thing in two areas. So I feel that there's a whole personalization that can happen when you have all this data, when it comes to messaging, when you have the predictions, but most importantly, to be able to prioritize. So prioritizing your customers, prioritizing your messages, but also the tools that are being used actively by your team to be able to understand the effectiveness of that. So that's where I feel that it can bring more value, more precision to what both marketing teams and sales teams and perhaps medical teams are doing.
On that, because you mentioned many questions about how AI and data is being collected, is the interactions, of course, with HCPs, being able to have that, you know, being able to have that different engagement leads us to different types of data being collected. I have a poll out for the audience. What has been a challenge? You know, we've talked about digital, we've talked about AI, talked about data collecting, creating quality. I have a poll out. What are the challenges for pharma to operationalize digital? How does the rubber meet the road? I want to take a few minutes to think about that. But when we're, you know, as the audience is filling that out, we talk about the technology, we talk about the data. Jérôme, now, how does that really happen in your organization? And then what were the challenges for you to operationalize that in your own organization?
Yeah, I see a number of challenges to operationalization, right? One challenge, I think, is that sometimes digital projects are great, they are innovative, but they are focused on the wrong area of the business. And therefore, they are not addressing a true business priority. So there's really a need to make sure that digital innovation is serving the strategic agenda, the strategic priorities of the organization. And what typically works well to ensure that is to make digital more central to planning, to have digital being a core part of the brand team, and obviously avoiding silos. Another challenge worth mentioning is about scale. Moving projects at scale quickly. In organization, we need to find the right balance between the need to pilot new ideas, because obviously you don't want to spend too much at risk, and the issue that the pilot phase may take too long, right? Fell off the radar or never demonstrate meaningful value just because it's too small. And so really quickly identifying in an organization which digital projects to kill and which are the vital fews that you want as an organization to focus on and scale up is really key. Another challenge is linked to data governance and infrastructure. Some companies are just not maximizing data because of governance and infrastructure issues. And I think it can come from two different things. Sometimes data is sitting in different places, and just functions are not aware that the data simply exists. And sometimes people know that the data exists, but there's a lack of resource or a lack of capability to process it and really move from what you were referring to, from the kind of big data dump into actionable insight. The last one I would mention is getting senior management buy-in. I think it's absolutely key as well. If the CEO of an organization is not convinced and not reflecting the importance of digital in his org structure, then the behaviors won't change. And really the scale up of promising ideas will likely not move forward.
We're getting a few responses back, and it seems your first point on getting clarity around business needs, the strategy that leads to the pilot, that leads to the outcomes seems to be the most popular of, it seems, to the audience, because I think that driving of strategic need, and of course bringing all the stakeholders together to make sure, you know, there is like a real vision of what this project is trying to create, especially when you're using new technologies. And, you know, if not all the stakeholders have agreed, you're kind of working in your own silo again, and you haven't gotten out of your own silo of course, data as well. What do you think about the poll, Orchid? Like, what are your comments on what were, you know, which one would have you voted for that you think is the most pertinent for you?
I think the audience is right on in terms of, I think, the experience that we've had with our company and what we hear. I think the most critical barrier, unfortunately, is still the lack of business needs being really articulated, exactly what we just said. And not just the need. I think everyone has a business need. Of course, everyone wants to increase their market share. Everyone wants to grab more patients. Everyone, you know, the competitive activity. I think those are very obvious things that run across all organizations. But specifically, what problem are you trying to solve, and then for whom? I think, for instance, our platform is right now designed very heavily to deal with the user who's front-facing. We felt that that was the way to start, because that's exactly, you know, where the rubber meets the road, the salesperson or the field person. But our platform also serves the needs of marketing and other groups. But I think there has to be an understanding of who's using it first, what the benefits are. It seems like a very ominous task to start such a project, but I think if you're clear on that, you could take a stepwise approach. And I think that's the key. That's another barrier that maybe isn't in the poll, in terms of how do companies actually work with small startups. You know, I've worked for giant companies most of my life, many different pharma, and I do understand the pain that pharma has in the brand planning process. Where does this fit in? Where's digital? However, we need to wake up and realize digital is actually part of the brand planning process. What I'm hearing still is, you know, we're doing the brand planning process, come back to us in 6 months, we'll see what we could do with digital. Digital is often seen as a tactic, as a message content kind of place, and digital should actually be within the brand planning process. And I think most companies have it in there, but I wonder if they put it in as a tactic versus as a way to actually understand what to do. You know, let the data tell the story. Perhaps with digital, you can do a prioritization that's active targeting, that's dynamic. It doesn't need you to do the old segmentation once a year the same way over and over again. You can look at that very dynamically, and actually bring it right into the planning process. So that's one thing I think that stops pharma, because there's a very rigid planning process. I remember it. It was a little bit like Groundhog Day every year. You know exactly what people are doing this time. Right now, you're planning everything for 2022. And, you know, everyone's doing presentations and so on. But if you could just think about, okay, so is there something I can do differently? And that's the key. And part of this is, how do we work with the digital vendors, and there's so many of them here today at this conference, that can really speed us up. You don't have to create everything in pharma, and some of these things can be more off-the-shelf type of opportunities where you can learn and learn fast and move forward. So those are the two areas that we struggle with in terms of how to work with small vendors sometimes, but also, do you have a business case, and are you measuring it? Do you have a measurement metrics around that?
Jérôme, we discussed some of the challenges that you have. What have you seen as a success going from pilot to implementation for you? Like, what was what was that transition for you as a company? Like, what was one of a great, you don't have to give a specific example, but what helped that move forward quicker for you?
I think what really helps is to have the buy-in of the senior management, as I was alluding to before. If it's really on top of the agenda, then the scale up of the good ideas will be easier. What we had seen in the past is projects that are focused on the wrong area of the business, on areas which are not strategic priorities, and which end up staying in that pilot stage forever and never getting scaled to different countries, to different franchise. Where we've seen success is really when a project is solving a critical business need, focused on the strategic priority of the organization, there's alignment across key stakeholders that this is the right project, and then it's much easier to align the different countries, the different general managers behind the idea, and to have them roll out the project in their country, and to have the same alignment across the different franchises. So I think this is really the critical success factors when it comes to scaling up.
And I think one of the things, though, you know, you're asking for multiple stakeholders to come to, you know, to have that buy-in. Is that also including the stakeholders at the IT level, at you know, everyone who's processing and bringing in the data? You know, is that the buy-in that you've seen success? Like, do they come right away, or is it a little bit more of kind of a maneuvering to say, hey, you know, I need to sell you on this a bit?
I mean, I think IT is you know, it's a critical enabler when it comes to innovation, but in the end, it's really the business driving those projects, right? It's if the head of the franchise, if the head of the countries are aligned that this is meaningful, this is going to help the business, it helps for the idea to come to life, really. If it's just an idea that sits within the IT department that's disconnected from the needs of the business, then it doesn't work. So I think really the buy-in of the franchise and of the key countries is critical.
Perfect, thank you. I have another question, and I'm wondering, I would love to get some, you know, what are some of the unique things you're working on at Ipsen, and what you're doing in your area, because I think that's kind of, we want to get a little bit of a sneak peek into your world at what you're working on.
Yeah, so I think at Ipsen, our leadership has really embraced and is promoting actively digital transformation. So in that sense, that's great to be working in that organization. We are now operating in an asset-centric model. So the digital leads are core members of the asset teams, and they are fully integrated into the brand planning process. In addition, we have this global digital team really operating as a center of excellence and really helping to push the innovation agenda and supporting the franchise and the affiliates in the rolling out and the rollout of the digital innovation. Finally, one important point is, you know, Ipsen is a mid-size pharma, right? It's not a big pharma. It's a mid-size organization. So really, we can't go in every direction. We have really an absolute need to be very focused on those vital few digital and advanced analytics projects and initiatives that are truly fully aligned with what we're trying to solve as an organization and with the purpose that we have in the society. And so once we have identified those areas, it's much easier, as I was saying before, to really deploy them at scale quickly across markets and franchise.
Helen, we have some questions, a couple of questions from the audience. I don't know if you wanted to address. Andreas and Sanjeev.
Yeah, so there's, I think there was a question about, again, the success of, you know, being able to have and orchestrate the right engagement across an organization, and that, you know, the sales rep is just one of the channels that is connected to this organization, is across the whole engagement spectrum. And I think when it comes to, you know, how do you take someone who's very in the front line to move up their knowledge up to the business strategy? I think I'd like to ask both to say, how do you move up that knowledge that's in the front line up to closer to that, you know, the business, you know, the thought leadership, the business who's leading that strategy? So it's a mixture of, I think, if I rephrase the question, is like a tactical, how do you make the tactical into a strategic?
Maybe I'll address that, because like I said, I have a lot of passion around what salespeople do. And one of the things that I always tell my team at ODAIA is we are not just AI, we are really augmenting intelligence. And that's actually it's an actual tech term as well, but we are augmenting the intelligence of whoever's at the front facing as well as in the companies. And to me, that's key, because we've all gone through transformations, not just digital ones, but lots of change management issues where representatives are pushed down a tool that maybe they don't like, they don't see the value, they have no idea why they're doing it, they're being measured by it. And we know what happens in those cases. Often they do what they're told, but the actions become sort of garbage in, garbage out in terms of data. And what we want to do is really make the rep the gatekeeper, but at the same time an orchestrator. And we have to create, when we do that, we have to create a tool that they adopt and they believe is one of their friends rather than replacing them. And so we do a lot of thinking. We spend a lot of time with our rep focus groups and engage them to see if what we're creating actually creates delight for them. And we're very stuck on this, because I've seen the tools that pharma uses and they're not very beautiful. And why can't a tool look like an iPhone that you're using on an hourly basis? Why can't it, bring you value that's very quick and impactful? So that's one of the things that we want to energize the sales force. And they're absolutely in there as a main. Our data shows that when the representatives are calling on physicians, it's the most valuable resource still. It's the biggest impact on prescriptions. So absolutely, they're there. But all these other channels that are being used should also be within the mix of the brand plans and be measured actively in terms of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And Orchid, I think the pandemic has been an accelerator, right? In that sense, it's driven the adoption of those new tools and new ways of working, both on the commercial teams, on the field force, but also on the HCP side. So, so one key area, for example, is engagement. We've seen longer and more in-depth engagements being possible with digital. I think it was demonstrated during the pandemic that it can actually work. The physicians, they are seeing the benefits of more virtual engagements, because they can now choose, what they want to consume, when they want to consume the content, when they want to engage. But at the same time, I think it has raised the bar. It has raised the bar for the pharma industry, who really needs to deliver valuable content to the customer and enrich his experience, because there's less reliance on personal relations. The HCPs, they appreciate virtual engagement, but they also report that it can be overwhelmed by this increasing volume of digital content being poured at them, and the fact also that they need to serve the patients, of course, as their top priority, and they have less time to process, filter, and read the lengthy generic communications that sometimes comes from the industry. So what they want, and our mission, and why it's raised the bar, is they want more targeted communication, and they want scientific content.
Yeah, completely. I think there's a more conversational engagement around, the content, and I think there's always been a saying that content is king, but context is queen. So being able to balance when the context is right. But I totally agree with you. We're coming down to the last minute, so I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Orchid. Thank you, Jérôme, for taking the time to join us for the next normal. And I'm gonna thank again the audience for the polls and the questions. And I hope to see everyone live next year. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Helen. Thanks, everyone.